Hello, so this is an article I did in my social services for the elderly class that I really enjoyed, so I kept it. It's called Dementia: Sustaining Self in the Face of Cognitive Decline. It is argued that the way in which we view a person with dementia can have a significant effect on the level of disability and well-being of the person. There is a divergence between a belief that the self disintegrates, leaving a non-person, and a belief that the self remains but is misplaced and can be maintained with the appropriate approach from others. This article seems to examine the differing approaches to self and personhood in dementia care, and establish ways of approaching care for the person with dementia which may limit the extent of disability in the face of cognitive decline. Over the last 20 years, social psychology has become very prominent in the area of dementia care, proposing a notion of personhood which places the person with dementia at the center of care, challenging and advancing alternatives to the understandings of dementia that were focused on decay, decline, and deficiency. This alternate viewpoint of a dementia is not a new one, however, and has its background in phenomenology and the idea of self. This physiological approach seeks to identify the subtle and profound ways person, body, others, world are immediately intertwined. However, within the notion of personhood, there are two distinct opinions of the self and dementia that have arisen within the field of phenomenology. I can't read that word. This article seems to explore those oppressing viewpoints and establish the most relevant position for healthcare professionals working in the field of dementia care. So this is titled Missing Person, Have You Seen Her? Her body might be with us, but her soul has left the room. The above quote is from a song by Richard Gard. The song was written about his mother, in which he describes her as a missing person. The song is a very moving and personal account of his experience with dementia, and interestingly describes a particular view of personhood held by Heidegger. This viewpoint is one which considers the human existence of the self to be self-imprinting, with a temporal understanding of being a dynamic engagement with the world through our bodies. When a person has dementia, the cognitive dysfunction erodes our being in the world, which splinters the sense of being and therefore the sense of self. It is argued that the process of being in the world is disrupted, new experiences cannot be retained, and eventually the physical aspects of experiencing the world is impaired as cognitive declines. This approach to dementia considers that the person is undergoing a loss of self, which results in a non-person. Indeed, Davis states that dementia is a fraying of the self. Dementia affects the dismantling of the self until there is nothing left. This position assumes that the decline and loss of cognitive functions causes a disintegration of personhood and an unbecoming of self. If we adopt this standpoint and view people with dementia as a non-person, the ethical requirement to provide care and support is diminished. This reduces care input so that only the physical needs of the person are met, and also risks that the life of the person is seen as meaningless. Indeed, Singer argues that the person with dementia gradually becomes an empty husk, and that beyond a certain stage the person is gone. He goes on to argue that a person with dementia should be euthanized in order to reduce the economic burden and the burden on caregivers. However, Singer's Unitarian perspective has been heavily criticized, with some saying that he is dangerous, an intellectual psychopath, a Nazi, and morally just wrong. Horoskitz argued that this approach to the self in dementia stemmed from the medical model approach to care. It was nurtured to meet the needs of researchers, research institutions, and self in dementia. And to solve clinical, practical, and psychological issues. She argues that the discourse around the loss of self in dementia has created a vision of the person with dementia as a dehumanized monster, which generates a fear of growing older as people try to face their own future potential monstrous monstruousness should they develop dementia. So then it goes on, the article goes on for that for a little bit, and then talks about the misplaced being. I'm not at peace, I am in pieces. The above statement is from a lady with dementia. It is her response to being told to be at peace and describe how a person with dementia experiences a fragmentation of themselves rather than a loss of self. While a very poignant statement, it also serves to demonstrate an alternate view of the self in dementia through biophenomenology, as described by Jacob von Uelkel. So this article goes on to talk about the different things. So one is the different ideas for the self in relation to dementia care. We had heard about the non-person. They're not themselves anyway. They're not a person. And then the misplaced person, they may be still, but they're still fragments. There's fragments there, but not a whole person. And then finally we have personhood. Taking forward this notion of self, a more contemporary concept of personhood has been developed within dementia care. The notion of personhood is not new and was originally discussed by René Descartes and John Locke. The original perspective was based on the idea that cognition is essential for personhood to exist. While not a new idea, this altered approach to personhood within dementia care was introduced by Tom Kitwood in the early 1990s as a new way of understanding dementia and providing support in order to maintain personhood. So this approach defines personhood as a standing or status that is bestowed upon one human being by others in the context of particular social relationships and institutional arrangements. This perspective of personhood promotes a shift from the biomedical model, suggests that the symptoms and quality of life the person with dementia are a result of social interactions of the person with others rather than a result of neurological changes. So, in conclusion of this article, while the approaches of the self in dementia discussed here are not exhaustive, they represent the current mainstream opinions within dementia care setting within the UK. Historically, the view that the self erodes to nothing or a non-person was the prominent approach, directing care, which was not person-centered. However, since the advent of the approach proposed by Tom Kitwood, the view has changed to one which recognizes that the self and personhood of a person remains and must be supported in order to increase the well-being of a person with dementia. Kitwood's person-centered model of dementia care has proved to be excellent in advising the care of people with dementia. However, this is not without flaws, and other approaches should be considered which progress the approach to creative, supportive, inclusive, and understanding care for the person with dementia. So that's it. I do agree with the overall article. The person with dementia, they may not have memories, but they're still a person. They still deserve a high quality of care. And our empathy, really. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hello. So this is the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me, basically. I make these videos for myself, but it helps knowing that if somebody else liked it. So, thanks for watching.